Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is that ISIS has taken control over significant parts of the Sinai Desert. The Sinai Desert might very well be where ISIS is most powerful and best organized right now. It's probably there that they are better organized than in Syria, in Yemen, or even in Iraq. The Sinai is home to Ansar Bait al-Maqdis, ABM, which means the Protectors of Jerusalem, also known as Wilayat Sinai, which means the Sinai province. This is the ISIS affiliate in Sinai. ABM is over 10,000 fighters strong. That is a massive and significant number, especially considering that 30,000 is the number of fighters that ISIS has in Iraq and Syria combined. They threatened Egypt regularly, and they're right on Israel's border. Israel has increased their intelligence in Sinai, as they expect that ABM will attempt an attack, and there is very little chance that there will be any advance warning. Just a few days ago, Israel's special forces conducted a surprise set of maneuvers in the south. They were role-playing an ISIS attack in Eilat and Nitzana. Israel is aware of the threat and is proceeding with extreme caution and care. Remember, ABM is the group that downed the Russian airliner in Sinai, which killed 240 people recently. Now Israel is working very closely with Egypt and has increased every aspect of defense strategy. What makes the fight against this ISIS affiliate so complicated is that the most feared and best organized Bedouin tribe in the region has become part of the ISIS bloc. The Sawarkar tribe is the most brutal and the most powerful of all 26 tribes in Sinai. Cross the Sawarkar tribe and you die. This is their reputation, and it is well earned. The Sawarkar began their business as smuggling drugs into Israel and across the Middle East. Then they moved on to weapons, and now people and just about everything else. This tribe has 2,500 fighters always. 10,000 are in reserve. They're divided into organizations and units, which are 75 to 100 fighters in each unit, each with clear roles and distinct responsibilities. They are a professional fighting force. This Bedouin tribe knows the terrain like no one else, and they are extremely loyal to one another. Right now, the tribe favors ISIS. They have an alliance which will attack Egyptian forces and all Westerners. The head of the operations for Sawarkar is Ibrahim al-Manai. He granted only one interview, and it took place in a cafe in Cairo. In the interview, al-Manai made it clear that his tribe is well outfitted and well trained in the use of numerous weapons and many tactics. Most importantly, it was clear from the interview that al-Manai sees the Sinai as belonging to the Sawarkar, and they will not permit any outsider control over any of what is theirs. None of this portends well. The union between ISIS and the fierce Bedouin tribe with experience in smuggling goods and people into Israel is very dangerous and a very dangerous nexus, period. ISIS released a radio address on Saturday, December 26th, in which the voice of their leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is heard saying that he has not forgotten about Palestine and that ISIS is coming for the Jews. He said, and I quote, "The Jews thought we forgot Palestine and that they had distracted us from it." He continues, "Not at all. Jews, we did not forget Palestine for a moment. With the help of Allah, we will not forget it. The pioneers of the jihadist fighters will surround you on the day that you think is distant, and we know is close. We are getting closer every day." By pioneers, Baghdadi means the first ISIS terrorists who have the plans and are plotting to attack Israel. Israel is aware of this, but also they have become aware of many other threats. And even without the warning delivered by this radio address by Baghdadi, they are still working very hard to defend itself. Jordan is also fighting the fight against Muslim terrorism in a serious way. Jordan has decided not to allow Khalid Mashal to visit their country. Mashal is the head of Hamas. In 1999, he was officially expelled from Jordan, and the Hamas offices were closed. Since then, Mashal, who has Jordanian citizenship, has visited only once with permission in 2012. Jordanian leadership believes that Mashal and Hamas will disrupt Jordan. They think that Mashal will incite and agitate. The purpose of this trip is to celebrate the release from prison of a Muslim Brotherhood leader, Zakai Banai Ershaid. Ershaid was found guilty of harming relations between Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. He publicly renounced the pact between the two countries. Jordan told Mashal that he was not welcome at this time. In other words, circumstances might change. These things happen. At another time, he might be permitted to visit. For instance, in 2012, when Mashal last visited Jordan, he met with the king. That is significant. Mashal went from an audience with the king to not being permitted entry at all. At this point, Mashal and Hamas are seen as problems by the Hashemite kingdom. We will see what happens as time passes. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is a column from the Jerusalem Post by Mati Gabay, dated December 27th, 2015. The column is entitled, Test Yourself, Do You Support Terror? And then there's a subtitle, Answer These Questions and Look in the Mirror, not a glimpse, but a good couple of minutes. Gabay is the managing editor of the JerusalemPost.com, their website, jpost.com. He took over in December 2013. He is 34 years old. He was born in Israel to American parents who made Aliyah. Here is how Gabay begins. He asks a series of questions and wants to show the reader that there is a serious bias about terror. He begins. Anyone can say they are against terror. It's the easiest thing in the world. Anyone can condemn terror as well. It's easy. It's just words. But do you really condemn terror? Every kind of terror? Then Gabay asks a series of questions. The objective is to show that we have a bias with regard to terror itself. He asks, when you read about a Palestinian kid that attacks a Jewish kid with a knife while he's riding his bike, is this terrorism? When a Palestinian runs over settlers with his car, is he a terrorist or a freedom fighter? When a Palestinian woman stabs a soldier in the back, is she a terrorist or is she fighting the occupation? When PA leader Abbas condemns a terror attack but then adds a but, does this make you furious? Do you think attacking settlers or soldiers is a legitimate way for Palestinians to fight and therefore not considered terror? When a young Palestinian attacks an innocent civilian, is it considered in your eyes terror? Or should we check first the background of the attacker? For example, was someone in his family killed by the IDF? Gabay just scratches the surface, but you get his general direction. Then Gabay turns the tables and asks what he calls harder questions. Here are some of his harder questions. Can a Jew be considered a terrorist? Does it matter in any way if the victim of an attack was a Jew or Muslim, Israeli or Palestinian? Should Jewish terrorists be treated in any way different than Muslim terrorists? Is there a difference between Jews chanting death to the Arabs and Hamas propaganda asking to kill all Zionists? When you find out that a terror victim of a Palestinian attack was an Arab and not a Jew, did that make you happy or less sad? Should the Shin Bet interrogate Jews in a less harsh way than Arabs? When public figures condemn Jewish attacks, but then add a but, does that drive you crazy? Can Arab terror ever justify a similar response of Jewish terrorism? Then he writes, answer these questions and look in the mirror. Not a glimpse, but a good couple of minutes. Be honest with yourself. Gabay concludes his opinion piece with a simple repetition. Terror is terror is terror. Gabay's point is well taken. One must be consistent and demand a sense of moral clarity on these issues. Many Israelis and many Jews are quick to condemn Palestinian terror and leadership, but less critical of Jewish and Israeli actions. The most important point is one which he skims over and nearly misses entirely. It's not simply valuable to realize that there is terror on both sides, and that readers have serious difficulty separating out the differences. Gabay misses that there is a huge difference between attacking civilians and attacking soldiers and police. Terror, by definition, is an attack against citizens, innocent, defenseless citizens, and not against military targets. This is very important and a huge distinction. He puts soldiers and settlers together. That is wrong and dishonest and shows his bias. Second up is a column by Elliot Abrams and was published in the Council on Foreign Relations website. It was published on December 22nd, 2015. The column is entitled, Reassuring, Not Challenging Iran. Elliot Abrams is a senior fellow for Middle East Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations in Washington, D.C. He served as Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy National Security Advisor in the administration of President George W. Bush, where he supervised U.S. policy in the Middle East for the White House. The column takes President Obama to task on the way he's following up with Iran. So the topic is not the nuke deal itself, but rather the post-nuclear deal. This is how Elliot Abrams begins. Since the signing of the nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran, that government has treated the Obama administration with contempt. U.S. officials might have hoped Iran's conduct would improve, but it has worsened. Iran sent more Revolutionary Guard troops to fight in Syria, for example. It conducted 2 ballistic missile tests in violation of Security Council resolution. Leaders continue to chant death to America, and it has imprisoned more Americans. What is the Obama administration's response? To beg their pardon. Abrams now explains what beg their pardon means. He goes on to describe the Obama administration's apology to Iran for trying to keep terrorists out of America and keeping America safe. This is his quote. I refer to a remarkable letter sent by Secretary of State Kerry to Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif. Iran, in an additional gesture of contempt, has complained about the United States visa requirements placed on persons who have traveled to Iran or Iraq, Sudan, or Syria. These requirements were recently added so that people who visited those countries could not come to the United States without getting a visa, even if they were from countries that are part of a visa waiver program. The obvious purpose, to avoid having terrorists get to the United States through a program that allows them to avoid the visa application process and the information it would supply. Then Abrams begins to read the entire letter, a short 2-paragraph letter. It's a letter written by John Kerry, the United States Secretary of State, to Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif. The letter, December 19th, 2015. His Excellency Mohammad Javad Zarif, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Tehran. Dear Mr. Minister, thanks for the constructive meeting yesterday. I wanted to get back to you in response to your inquiry about amendments to our visa waiver program. First, I want to confirm to you that we remain fully committed to the sanctions lifting provided for under the JCPOA. We will adhere to the full measure of our commitments per the agreement. Our team is working hard to be prepared. As soon as we reach implementation day, we will lift appropriate sanctions. I am also confident that the recent changes in visa requirements passed in Congress, which the administration has the authority to waive, will not in any way prevent us from meeting our JCPOA commitments. and that we will implement them so as not to interfere with the legitimate business interests of Iran. To this end, we have a number of potential tools available to us, including multiple entry, 10-year business visas, programs for expediting business visas, and the waiver authority provided under the new legislation. I am happy to discuss this further and provide any additional clarification. And then Abrams concludes that the U.S. appears more worried about insulting Iran than saving Americans. Listen to this. Mr. Kerry seems more worried about offending Iran than freeing those Americans whose imprisonment was an issue set aside during the nuclear negotiations. Must we set it aside forever as we protect Iran's legitimate business interests? How could you not agree with this assessment? Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. There are 4 cartoons I want to discuss today. The first comes from the Chicago Tribune and the Tribune Media Services. The artist is Scott Stannis. It's a play on the new Star Wars movie. Over the past few weeks, Star Wars has been a frequent theme in political cartoons. The 2 most popular themes and topics in cartoons are Star Wars and Trump, actually in the reverse order. Trump is more frequent than Star Wars, and very often, actually, they combine the 2 topics. This cartoon has Kylo Ren, the villain in the last Star Wars movie, holding a red lightsaber. A bit of background. This is the most openly conflicted villain in the series so far of Star Wars. He's the grandson of Darth Vader and the son of Han Solo, Harrison Ford, and Princess Leia, known as General Leia now, played by Carrie Fisher. So behind this black hooded character are a huge crowd of stormtroopers. Obama has his back to them, and with his hand up in the air and thumb pointing, he says, "Check out the JV team." This JV theme has been another common theme that President Obama just can't live down. It was such a huge misunderstanding of ISIS, and the cartoonists love to use it and reuse it. Next up is by Adam Siglis from the Buffalo News. It's a Kegel cartoon syndicate. It was published in December 2015, and it's called Twitter Handle. You've got a picture of an AH-15 machine gun, and it says ISIS recruitment on top of it, where the handle would be. And where the grip and the clip is, where they would normally be, are the symbols for Facebook and Twitter. This is a very telling and very problematic cartoon. It's telling us what we all know, that social media is a major bulwark for ISIS recruitment. Facebook and Twitter, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Skype, and so many other forums of social media are what help pull in new recruits to ISIS. Third up is a cartoon by Dan Wasserman, published in the Boston Globe. It was also a Tribune Media. It was published in December 2015. The cartoon takes place in a gun shop called Guns R Us. A guy in fatigues walks in, and the salesman is showing him a machine gun. The salesman asks, "I'll need to see a photo ID, driver's license, passport, or terrorist watch list." The cartoonist is making fun of the terrorist watch list. You see, because the woman involved in the San Bernardino terrorist attack was actually on the terrorist watch list, but she got into the country and got a weapon also. This last and final cartoon, the 4th cartoon, is from Jordan. It's by Ahmad Hajjaj. It was published on December 10th, 2015. It's called The Destiny of Bashar Assad Conference. Hajjaj normally draws a character named Abu Majoub. He's a witty and insightful character based on his father. He's meant to be the average Jordanian Joe, just asking questions, insightful questions. This cartoon takes place in space. Assad is floating in space along with all the Russian space junk, floating outside the Russian space station. It should be obvious. Assad is just another piece of Russian garbage. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. A world-famous Arab expert on Islam, Dr. Omer Salem, was heckled at the University of Haifa From news coverage these days, one would think naturally that he was heckled by Israeli Jews. But no, it was actually not Israeli Jews who heckled Dr. Salem. Two Palestinian psychology students disrupted his lecture. They called Salem a collaborator and said that he had Palestinian blood on his hands. Dr. Omer Salem was born in Egypt. He teaches at Yale University. His area is what Islam thinks of Jews and the opposite. And he's created an institute for bringing Jews and Arabs together. Salem focuses on Israel and also deals with other areas in the Middle East. The hecklers shouted at Salem that he has the blood of martyrs spilled and that you get the middle finger. Arabic and Hebrew, this expression is graphic and vulgar. In English, well, you get the idea. The hecklers shouted that Salem should go back to Egypt and solve their problems. These two students succeeded in stopping the meeting. It was all caught on tape. Security came. The hecklers were referred to the university's Committee on Discipline. The university responded by saying that it is unacceptable to disrupt a presentation in an academic institution. The students will be punished. Freedom of expression and academic independence are essential. The sad part is that these students represent the Balad Party, an Israeli Arab party, which is represented in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. These students clearly have enormous difficulty with the concept of freedom of speech. There are ways to protest and ways to disagree. Heckling and being disrespectful is not a time-honored democratic principle. However, freedom of speech and freedom of expression are. Next, the Chinese passed their new anti-terrorism law. Everyone in the counterterrorism community, including Western politicians, are waiting to see how strict these new Chinese laws will be. The basis of the law is that all technology will be required to have a back door, and all providers will be required to provide encryption keys to the government. That includes media, internet, phones, cell phones, computers, everything. Obviously, there are many concerns about the abuse of personal rights, which for many years has been abused in China. In the West, governments have asked businesses to turn over their encryption keys. So far, they have been declined. The most obvious example is Apple. The iPhone 6 has a very simple yet highly effective encryption system. When asked by Homeland Security to turn over the encryption key, Apple demurred and said doing so would violate the privacy of their customers. It is almost impossible to crack these encryption systems, and the more they are used by terrorists, the safer terrorists will feel, and the easier it will be for them to coordinate and execute their attacks. A balance must be achieved between preserving citizen privacy and tracking terrorists and terrorist activities. One more item. 3 swastikas and the word Hitler were discovered recently by students outside PS 90, the Edna Cohen School in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. New York Police Department officials say that the students discovered the anti-Semitic symbols and graffiti around 9 a.m. just outside the school at 2840 West 12th Street and alerted the school staff, who then called the police. The graffiti was written in crayon. The officials said that they were hate crimes. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, tell me what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know Sinai is the name of a desert and the name of a mountain that Moses ascended and received the Torah? It has many names. Horev is one. The mountain of God is another. In Arabic, it's called Tur Sina or Jabal Musa or Gabal Musa, depending on your dialect, which means the mountain of Moses. Bedouin tradition says that this mountain peak, around which the Israelites camped and Moses ascended to and received the Torah itself. It's called Mount Sinai in the desert. Josephus describes a mountain like Sinai. There's a monastery built on top of it in the 6th century. It's called Santa Caterina. And there is even an older monastery nearby, which is another potential site of the real Mount Sinai. There are 2 paths up the peak to Mount Sinai. One is very steep, and one which is less steep. You can take 3,750 steps up or a slow 2 hours and 30 minutes winding way all the way up the mountain. I can tell you from experience that the sunrise from there at the top of that peak is breathtaking. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.